Hello, and welcome to the Beginner's Guide to Genshin Impact. My name is Azuark, and it's time to start our discussion of one of the most important aspects of Genshin, team building. This is a major topic that we couldn't possibly cover quickly, but we're going to at least make a start today. New players often fall into the trap of just playing one character or staying on that character longer than they should. Ideally, you should be switching to your other characters about once every 15 to 20 seconds in battle. This means about 10 to 15 seconds on your carry, and then a few more cycling through the rest of the team. The game is obviously designed to be played with squads of 4 characters, and thus, it's important to think about how these 4 characters interact with one another. Longtime players who have tons of character options practically make a sport out of this. They consider the far-reaching implications of adjusting one character in the team for another, who the ideal teammates are, how they can adjust the order of which characters they swap into can create an advantage, and far more. As such, one of the most important things I want to emphasize right now is that you probably don't want to watch guides on most other content creators' channels unless they specifically mention keeping new players in mind, or unless you want to see what's possible when your account is older than dirt. When you first start off, your roster options are going to be so limited, you're going to need to stick to good team building precepts, and perhaps keep an eye on the future, while also remembering that your current goals do not include the spiral abyss beyond getting your free Xiangling. And speaking of Xiangling, I want to relate a quick story. I actually have 3 accounts. My main account on Americas, my channel account on Europe, and an old abandoned alt I started on Asia ages ago. On my Asia account, I started off with Bennett, Xingqiu, and a sacrificial sword and thought, great, and I can get Xiangling for free and use the national team. Easy peasy. The national team was a very famous setup from the early days of Genshin that used those 3 4-stars, plus a 4th character that could vary, and was renowned for its ability to mow through domains. Except there was one problem. It sucked in the overworld. Relying on Xiangling's damage is an exercise in frustration when enemies are all over the place or only come to you 1 or 2 at a time, and it just wasn't enjoyable to play. I ultimately dropped that team composition, or comp, for a pairing that should have been considered inferior, because it was simply more comfortable to play while adventuring. This isn't to say you shouldn't use Xiangling, just don't build your team around her burst early on. The moral of the story here is that the only person who will be able to truly decide what is best for your account is you. The first rule of Genshin Impact is play how you want to play, but the second rule of Genshin Impact is that the answer to any question starting with the word should is it depends. Context is king. For example, maybe you really want to play Traveler in your team. I dunk on Traveler regularly and do not ever advocate playing them unless you can get to Sumeru for their Dendro skills. However, if you decide that Traveler is the main character of the story and therefore they ought to be in your team, well then dagnabbit, you should play Traveler. Just be aware that a team of 4 favorite characters might not have a whole lot of synergy. So let's consider the cornerstones of what makes for a functional team. Not an amazing, earth-shattering, will destroy everything in 2 seconds, oh my goodness, look at this damage per screenshot team. A usable team. That's our goal. And the rest is up to you to decide. The first thing to consider is the role that each character performs on the team. The flashiest, most exciting characters are usually intended to be played on-field as main damage dealers. Unfortunately, you can't really make use of multiple on-fielders, and for some characters, this is all they're capable of. The funny thing is that you can technically use any character as a main damage dealer if you really want to. There are even meme builds with Barbara that aren't as awful as you might think. But the other 3 slots are generally considered to be supports. How they support, though, can take a lot of different forms. They might deal damage from off-field, like Fischl, apply their elements for reactions, like Xingqiu, heal your party, like Barbara, give you a shield, like Noelle, provide a buff, like Bennett, group enemies together, like Sucrose, or they might have some even more specialized use, like Ryan's ability to provide energy for the team. There are a lot of options, and ideally you should be thinking about how you can use the characters you have in a supportive role. Sometimes even their weapon type or how long their cooldowns are is worth considering. I will often tell you to keep Amber on your team initially just because she's a pyro bow user, and that Kai is handy because his elemental skill is reusable very quickly. But the other consideration, of course, is their element. The typical way to begin constructing a team goes like this. Number 1, pick a main damage dealer. Number 2, consider their element and ask which reactions would they most like to produce. And then number 3, find characters who are available in that element and pick one. This doesn't always apply, of course. Geo characters basically don't react with anyone, or you might prefer to start with a character who isn't well suited to being on field, but we've still got 2 more slots, so maybe just skip ahead a couple steps to number 4 then. 4, pick a defensive option, assuming you don't have one already. In your early days with the game, preferably someone who can heal. Your only guaranteed healer until AR20 is Noelle. 5, finally select a 4th character that covers any weaknesses or that better supports your current teammates. For example, in my account for this channel, I got Diluc very early, which made him a no-brainer, easy pick for main damage dealer. Not only is Diluc extremely good in that role, but I didn't have anyone else like Razor or Ningguang who is meant to be played that way. Next, I recognize that Diluc is a pyro damage dealer and probably wants to deal vaporize or melt damage. Vaporize is easier to work with if you have a good character, and it just so happens that I did, Xingqiu. Xingqiu's Hydro application from off-field is amazing and also adds damage. Plus he has a few minor defensive perks. Not enough that I felt comfortable treating him as my healer though, so I added Jean to the mix. Jean is a healer, and her Animo will be helpful in the overworld of Mondstadt and Liyue, as will Diluc's Pyro. Those are the 2 elements you'll find yourself wanting most frequently at first. And then I didn't have a specific character in mind for the 4th slot, so I let that be a flex, and pulled out whoever I needed in that moment. Amber if I needed a bow, Kai if I wanted cryo application, Noelle if I thought a shield might be handy. Given that we're still in the early going, I reasoned, rather than committing to an entire team, it might be good to have our options open for a little while. In the meanwhile, elemental coverage and having both a bow and a claymore are worthy considerations. But let's not kid ourselves. This account also had phenomenal starting circumstances. I got maybe the best 5-star to have in the extreme early game, at a point in the year where I was also able to select a second 5-star off the standard banner for free, and I happened to also have a great 4-star support option. I would argue this team is best case scenario, so let's go back in time to the days of my alt account, where in addition to getting Noelle with my first 10 pull, I also got Ningguang. Endgame players do not consider Ningguang to be very good, but I was willing to try her. In a weird twist, the character I most wanted to play her with was Noelle. While I don't normally recommend doubling up on elements when you're getting started, Geo's kind of funny. It's a very universal element that can work in most combat situations, and it benefits heavily from having a resonance bonus. This is the perk you get for having 2 of a particular element, and Geo's is especially good for Geo characters. Plus, I knew that both of these gals would be able to handle their energy needs if they had a Geo partner. So I slapped on 2 random other characters, one of them being Kaya, and off I went. I definitely had a bit of a learning curve, and Noelle stole the spotlight from Ning occasionally since she wants to be on field to do her healing, but it was a very interesting and different take on starting off, up until I thought I could try that national team. But I found that I actually liked the Ningguang-Noelle pairing better. I just had to swap Amber in constantly to solve overworld puzzles. Now, this is not the end-all be-all guide for how to choose your team. I will talk about more sophisticated ways to make those choices, and some additional considerations like energy needs and overworld traversal, but our very next priority is going to be asking, is this character any good? Which is a loaded question and a half, but we're going to try. So, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.